Those are words by Norbert, the Reverend Norbert Chapek. You'll hear more about him this morning very soon. He was the one that came up with, he and his wife, Maya, were the ones that developed this ritual that we're going to participate in this morning. And I'll talk more about that soon. So for those of you who have been coming a little while, you might notice lately, why is a minister talking about history a lot lately? For example, last week we talked about the 1500s, the only Unitarian king that existed. And today we're talking about somebody who was around in the late 1800s, early 1900s, who became Unitarian. So here's why. It is because we are witnessing increased oppression in our society, and we need to remember on whose shoulders we rest. Whose lives were lost in the fight for justice, equity, dignity, and human rights in the past. Indeed, who died, some of them, for the very rights that many of us have been granted, such as the ability to participate in the expression of our liberal faith, such as Reverend Norbert Chapek in Prague. I will speak more about him soon, but I feel I need to say something else. In our more contemporary times, while I realize the arrest of a minister, whether it was the Reverend Bill Breeden, a retired Unitarian Universalist minister who once served jail time in connection to the Iran-Contra affair, or myself in Washington, D.C. in 2016 on behalf of immigration reform, or the first female president of the UUA, Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, who was also the former Arizona minister who pled guilty in the protest for anti-illegal immigration law in 2010. Do you hear how long this fight has been going on for dignity and worth? For some people we don't even know. Or more recently, Reverend Ben of St. Petersburg. Now, there are two things all of us that I just mentioned have in common. One, we are all UU ministers with a collar or a stole, which means law enforcement is a little kinder when they arrest us. And the second is, none of us are persons of color, which means we have been treated differently. And if we'd been a person of color in street clothes rather than a stole or a collar, the outcome might be different. Now, that being said, I don't care what the color of the skin is. It is nerve-wracking when the handcuffs are placed on anyone's wrists and you're placed in a dirty jail cell. So I want to honor those who have been arrested. I get it. And yet, every one of us needs to remember that our commitment and conduct as Unitarian Universalists are just as important as in the past. We ground our actions in the past, people in the past who have struggled to fight oppression, just as we're doing now. All actions, regardless of whether it's an arrest or when someone shows up for a UU Sunday service in person or on Zoom, or when one participates in a public demonstration, these activities all express our faith tradition's imperative to manifest love, justice, and equity, to speak out and say, this isn't right. As Reverend Susan Frederick Gray said, this is no time for a casual sit-back faith. And this is no time to go it alone. So it's important to gather and to remember why we chose to, if you sign the membership books, sign up to be a UU or identify as a Unitarian Universalist, because we have history and ancestors behind us who were fighting before we came along. With gratitude for the opportunity to gather today and to participate in a specifically UU ritual, we will proceed with the flower ceremony. So let me tell you a little bit about how this came to be. First of all, many congregations, if you're a sunbird or you go somewhere else and have another congregation up north, a lot of times the flower ceremony is held in other northern congregations in the spring because that's when the flowers are blooming. Here in Florida, aren't we lucky? We have flowers that bloom most year round. So I like to do the flower ceremony in the fall. In the fall, right now, a lot of northern congregations are doing our water ceremony. It's another UU-specific ritual. Nobody else does it. And that is an ingathering where you pour water into a central bowl, symbolizing how we all come together, especially when you have families who have been on vacation, school starts, and so they do it in the congregations. However, I've been in Florida since 2012 as a minister, and because I realized that our homecoming tends to be in January and February, right? When a lot more of the sunbirds are here. So it doesn't matter when these rituals are held. It is that as long as we participate in them once a year, it's extra special and another way of creating and identifying the power of community. So more about this morning's communion. Whoops, there I said that word. Whew. So let's talk about that word. It means coming to the table. So we are coming to the table. We are following a tradition of our Unitarian ancestors today. And this tradition dates back to, we know the exact date, June 4th, 1923 in Prague, then called Bohemia. And like our attitudes of today, this ceremony emerged from a desire to serve the needs of those who wanted a form of ritual in their lives, but could not accept the practices of the Czechoslovak National Church, an offshoot of the Roman Catholic Church. Dr. Norbert Čapek was born in 1870. He was a come-outer from the Baptist faith who was forced to leave Czechoslovakia during World War I because of his outspoken writings about the war. So let's talk about when you send a postcard, when you send an email, when you send a note to board commissioners of the board, that you're speaking out, and even today there is a trail. I'm saying they'll know where it came from, they know who you are. So just as it was back then, so it is today, but for him, he came to the United States to get away from persecution and eventually studied at Meadville Lombard School, which is in Chicago. I did some of my UU work in Meadville Lombard. It's a Unitarian seminary, UU now, before returning to Prague. When he returned to Prague, he founded the Liberal Religious Fellowship in 1921. His congregation grew to 3,000 parishioners, and he started 7 missions in outlying areas. Now, a key component of the Liberal Religious Fellowship is to recognize that simply being human and living a life of the breath and the spirit, the earliest definition was breath. So if you are a breathing being, you are living a life of the spirit. So he felt that instead of the strict creed of the Roman Catholic Church, that there needed to be a place for people to come who could express themselves in a free and open place. He was also the author of more than 90 hymns, some of which continue to be sung in modern times. But it is the flower communion for which he is most remembered, as it came to be one of the most significant services for the Czech Unitarians. So, as I mentioned earlier, communion, it was never called communion. Part of it was because he wanted to step away from the ritual of the Roman Catholic. But because the word communion means an act or an instance of sharing, of coming to the table, it's often called the flower communion. I do call it the flower ceremony. Dr. Čapek continued to be an outspoken voice as one of the leaders of the underground opposition to the Nazi occupation of Czechoslovakia until 1942. At that time, the Gestapo broke into his apartment in Prague, confiscated his books and his sermons, and arrested him and his daughter. On charges of treason, he was sent from one concentration camp to another and finally ended up in Dachau, where he was executed. His wife, Maya Čapek, served as an ordained co-minister with her husband in Prague. She left Czechoslovakia to come to lecture in America in 1939 and did not return to Nazi occupation. While living in the United States, she was serving as acting minister in some of our congregations in Massachusetts, and it was she who introduced the flower communion to this country in the spring of 1940. Thus, our celebration today is continuing a Unitarian tradition that is now 102 years old. The flower ceremony was a way to communicate the strength of community in a time which words could not be openly spoken. We do not have these constraints on us anymore as we gather today in this community, yet the power of message to hold one another in faith is just as important for us now as it was for the Czechs in 1923. So let us take the time to appreciate the flowers that we have gathered this day into a colorful bouquet, for they do indeed represent the love that we carry deep in our hearts and the love and beauty that surrounds us. Just as we are aware of the beauty of the flowers when we take time to focus on them, so we are also able to be aware of the beauty of one another who sit all around us. There's no way to measure beauty of the assembled flowers, so there's no way to measure the beauty of our joys and our sorrows, our dreams, our grievings, our hopes, when we are able and willing to share our lives with one another, no matter the age or wisdom, no matter the experiences that have brought us here. We each have the capacity to grow, to sprout new parts of ourselves, and bring the unexplored self into full blossom. A reminder that Čapek was first a Baptist minister and then came around to Unitarianism. We have the capacity to let go of that which is dead within, to make room for that which is yet to come. Watching the witness of life's renewal, just as flowers grow from tiny seeds, we are called again and again into awareness of the sacred love that helps each of us to grow anew in the seasons of our lives. So what is happening for the flower that is you? What is happening for the flower that is you that needs to be cultivated or trimmed, shaped, or released? What potential awaits in the bud of your life that can touch those who share in your unfolding? Without saying names, I have a couple of instances of new unfolding. One person says, all my life I wanted to sing. I want to join a choir. Another person said, I notice I'm quick to anger these days. I'm working on calming that need, that feeling of being angry. These are sprouts. In the silence of this sacred space, in this moment of communion with the flowers, listen to that inner voice that helps you know and love the gardener, you, and the garden. Feel the spirit of life and be nurtured as you consider these flowers of the field and garden that we have gathered this day to symbolize our Unitarian Universalist congregation here on Nursery Road.